Could you go through that day? I guess it started as a security breach with your attackers, which were really turncoats that you had been working with, and it turned into a full-on ambush soon after the initial attack where you were wounded.
Yeah, so we had developed an SOP, a standard operating procedure, where if we were doing a large scale operation that would include members of the conventional military or the conventional police force, in addition to our dedicated commando unit. So we had a dedicated Afghan commando unit that lived with us, that we did most of our work with. But there would be times in which we would bring some of these conventional guys with us. We developed an SOP that these guys would show up to our compound if that's where we were going to meet them. And just the leadership of those elements would come into our motor pool area, which is just a word for, a parking lot. The leadership would come in and we would tell them what we were doing. And then they would go relay that to the rest of the troops that would remain outside of our wire. And that was really done just to minimize how many people were standing around us with guns that we really didn't know and spend much time with. We would train these guys, every now and then. We would go on operations with them every now and then, but there were hundreds of these troops and we didn't know which ones we were getting on any particular day. So it was just a security protocol we put in place, because that's a very vulnerable position for us to be in when we're all lumped together at one place at one time. And on this particular day, the leadership comes in, as well as a Ford Ranger pickup truck drives in to our compound. And I noticed it right away. Most of my team noticed it right away. Although myself and the rest of the Bravo section, we build the base defense plan. Everyone knows it. So it stood out. It certainly stood out to me. Immediately I see this and I'm like, yeah, that's a threat. That's a problem. They're violating our SOP. And now I'm at a decision point. We talked earlier about the balance between security and rapport and how that can be really difficult. It's important to note that this was on the very back end of our deployment. We had been there for 5.5 months. We only had a couple, 2-3 weeks left. So it's really easy for complacency to set in because of what you've been exposed to and because of the conditioning that has been set. You've seen wild things happen almost daily for that amount of time. You've seen a lot of things that violate, protocol, but there's no negative effect. And when that compounds over time, complacency can become a very real threat. In this particular scenario, I made a deliberate decision. I gave myself, it was 2 options. I was either going to go address this problem right now and err on the side of security, or I would wait and take a more diplomatic approach, get done with the work for today. And then I'll talk to my detachment commander. He'll talk to that individual's leadership. And then that's how we'll correct this problem moving forward, which is ultimately the decision that I made and one that I have to live with for the rest of my life. As soon as we got done with our mission brief and our final commo check, a member of the Afghan National Police Force, a guy that we've been working with and training and going on operations with, he jumped up on the back of that truck, which had a mounted PKM machine gun, and he opened fire into the group from about 15, 20 feet away. Absolute catastrophic situation. There were 12 U.S. casualties total, 3 of which were killed, and another 8 or 9 Afghans that were either killed or wounded. So a true mass casualty scenario. It's considered to be the most catastrophic insider attack that we have on record. And yeah, it began with a moment in time in which myself and my teammates, had a decision to make, and I decided to go right versus left. If nothing would have happened, then that's a decision in time that literally would not exist. But because things played out the way they did, it's easy to go back and play the what if game and question that, which I do pretty much every day. But I know why I made the decision that I made. It's unfortunate that obviously it played out the way that it did. And if I could go back in time and undo some stuff, then obviously I would do that.
But as far as actually taking the fire yourself, at first, was the pain there right away, or were you in such an adrenaline rush of trying to protect everyone in your group and just survive that you didn't even realize how serious your wounds were at first?
Yeah, no pain at first, impact. And from a weapon like that at that range, it feels like you're getting hit by a truck more so than like a piercing sensation. So it was just impact. And then I was on the ground, and then I felt another 2, 3, 4 impacts to my legs. No pain at that point. Adrenaline is surging, and we're now in the midst of a full on ambush, massive gunfight situation where we got machine gun and rockets, and it's just an absolute disaster of a scenario. I really didn't feel any pain until I began treating myself, probably 8 or 9 minutes after I'd initially been hit. Um, and really, when I say treating myself, I originally put on a couple tourniquets, which I got on my body within probably 2 minutes. But even with what ended up being 3 tourniquets on my leg, the bleeding hadn't stopped. Confirm that I needed to lift my leg up, but
We
I grabbed my leg and I picked it up. And that was when the pain first kicked in, and it just surged through my body. And I was on the verge of going unconscious. So then it was a battle to just stay awake because I had to continue to work on myself to try to pinch off this bleed. And my femoral artery had been cut. So I'm like gushing, blood is pumping out of me. So that was really where the pain kicked in for the first time. And then eventually I needed to apply an internal pressure dressing, which means that I took some gauze, loosened up one of the tourniquets, and I rammed this into one of the wounds at its highest point. And I was reaching kind of inside my thigh up towards my hip, trying to feel for the pulse of the femoral artery so I could get direct pressure on it to pinch off the bleeding. I got extremely lucky. And although I couldn't really feel much, I nailed the femoral, and I fed the gauze on top of it. I secured the tourniquet back down. I didn't know that I was that successful at the time, but I wasn't able to get loaded onto a helicopter for an hour and a half because of the ongoing fight. It took that amount of time for my team and our assets on the ground to get the situation on the ground under control enough where they could land a helicopter. And 90 minutes had gone by. You clip your femoral artery, usually you have somewhere around 8, maybe 10 minutes to live until your body is out of blood. So just the mere fact that I was still alive at 90 minutes proved that I was accurate with my pressure dressing. But yeah, no pain initially, adrenaline's pumping, and you're focused on a lot of different things at that point in time. It wasn't until I began working on myself that the pain really surged in.
What's going through your head here when you see there's a big ambush going on and you see time passing by? I know you eventually passed out before the helicopter came to save you, but what type of stuff is going through your head? I believe you went and to one of your to your friends who was also wounded in the calf to talk to him before you passed out. Was it just you're still focused on the mission, or did you have anything going through your head like, oh, this might be the end of it right now?
Yeah, I accepted the reality that this is where I was dying pretty much right when I realized by seeing it that my femoral artery had been cut. And it was at that point in time that I said, okay, this is where it ends. I knew that there was really no question in my mind about that, which was demonstrated just moments later when one of my teammates eventually got over to me, and I was trying to fight him away from me. I was telling him to go work on somebody else. I didn't know how many people were wounded, but I knew that there was a lot of us down. And I had put myself into what we call the expectant category. And when you do triage, which is just a way to organize patients based on the severity of their injuries to give those providing treatment an order in which to work in. based on time and resources. I put myself into the expectant category, that's the category of those that are going to die. And you do not waste precious minutes, moments, or resources on those individuals, because you need to take those resources and time towards those that have a chance of survival. It's a really difficult decision to make. I've been on both sides of that decision. It's really hard to do that. And I thought I was helping my teammate by doing that myself, saying like, dude, like, get out of here, go work on someone else. I'm dying here today. He ignored me. He's the one that put on the third tourniquet on top of the two that I had put on. But I knew that this is where it was going to end. And, you know, kind of the roller coaster of emotions that come with that. It began for me with this incredible feeling of frustration, because it was going to be coming at the hands of someone that I had been working with, you know, that sense of betrayal. And I taught that guy how to use that machine gun that he shot me and my friends with. That was really frustrating. That was a tough pill to swallow. So I can remember in that moment being really angry about that. But then that kind of passed quickly. And then, you know, I started feeling some guilt about what my parents and my family and my friends back home would have to go through. And the image of, you know, some commander handing my mother the folded flag at my funeral. And I felt guilty about what they were about to experience. And then once that passed, I felt this wave of content, and I was okay with it. And I mean, I truly and literally adopted this come back with your shield or on it mentality. And for me, that's what it took to strap it on and go do that work every single day. I was willing to accept either of those two outcomes. So I was okay with, if I'm going to die, I want it to be in combat alongside my brothers. Like, this is what I do. This is what I signed up for. And this is the way that this ends for warriors. And that's kind of the way it really just remained for the rest of the time I was on the ground, and all the way up until, you know, eventually I got to the hospital. But yeah, then, you know, once the work on me was done in terms of medical interventions, you know, I drug myself over to where one of my teammates was at. He'd been shot, like you said, through the calf. And I was like, you know, I may only have a minute left here before I'm done. And I'll just spend that trying to comfort, you know, my teammate the best I can.
As far as the Benedict Arnold, I guess you could call him, that betrayed you guys, I'm sure it might be classified information, but did he survive that firefight? And if he did survive, would he become kind of a future target due to the situation that he caused?
He probably would have if he was alive, but no, he was killed on the scene there. Probably, I don't know, I'd say within 15 seconds of him opening fire.
Now, it wasn't over for you once you were picked up in the helicopter. You had something else happen that you are extremely blessed to have survived, but it actually put you in a coma, I believe, for a while. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so eventually, once I got medevaced off the battlefield, which again was about an hour and a half after I was originally hit, myself and two of my teammates, the most critically wounded, were on the first lift out. They had really two options on where to send us. One was to Bagram, which, like I said, has a full-blown medical hospital, but it was a farther flight than this other location that had what we call an FST, which stands for Forward Surgical Team, which, similar to the way I explained, is a group of medical personnel that come together and they can do a lot of really amazing medical work just in a more austere environment outside of a hospital. It was faster. It was a faster flight to get us there. So they went with speed versus level of care, which is probably the right decision to make. They pulled me off the bird, me and two of my teammates, directly into the clinic. I am in desperate need of a blood transfusion. The fact that I wasn't already completely drained of blood at that point was literally a miracle. So they onboard blood. Some time goes by and my entire body begins to crash, and they aren't sure what the problem is, but they know I need to get to Bagram. So they put me back on a helicopter and they fly me to Bagram. It's about a 9-10 minute flight. And it's while I'm airborne that they realized that they had been administering an incompatible blood type to me, like 6 units of an incompatible blood type. And the only reason why they realized this is they went to switch out the blood that they had been giving one of my teammates. We have very similar last names, and they realized that they were giving him O positive, even though he's AB negative. And they said, "Oh, wait a minute, what were we just giving Nick?" And they looked to see what they'd given me, and they were giving me AB negative. So they switched up our names. Fortunately for my teammate Owen, I'm a universal donor. O positive can give blood to anybody. Unfortunately, I can't receive blood from anybody. So an AB negative is a very specific blood type. So it just absolutely began killing everything inside my body. So they realized what happened. They call Bagram Hospital and they say, Nick is en route. He's maybe 6 minutes out. There's no way he survives this flight to you guys. We just pumped him full of an incompatible blood type. And they said, okay, shit. Well, roger that. Well, the flight crew, the med crew on the bird that I was on, they got real creative with ways to keep me clinging to life. Panels, shots of adrenaline. I mean, these guys were like, they dumped out their med bag onto me and just started trying anything they could think of to keep me clinging to life. I arrive at Bagram. I have an extremely faint pulse. They put me on dialysis. They put me on another blood transfusion. They intubate me. So a machine is breathing for me. And, I was really clinging to life there for what ended up being about 3-4 days. And then just slowly I began coming back.
Yeah, that's an insane story that after coming so close to death, you had that happen to you, which is amazing.